name's Edgar Castillo, and this is my coming out story as a Mexican American. To give a little bit more context, I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. Both of my parents are from Chihuahua, Mexico, and I actually lived in Mexico until I was 5 years old. So I was born in El Paso, went to Mexico, and then went back to El Paso, and that's where I stayed until undergrad. My life growing up was heavily influenced by the Mexican culture, and I'd say my family was and is as traditional as it gets. Because of that, there were a lot of obstacles with my coming out journey, as one can imagine. Yeah, here we go. Once we moved to El Paso and started school there, I feel like there was a shift in kind of how I started expressing myself, and that came in the form of, one, I started befriending girls. For me, it felt a lot more comfortable to make friends with girls than it was with guys. I just felt like I could relate to a girl more than I could relate to a guy, and that also meant I started, just like, I don't know, like playing with dolls was super fascinating to me. It was in 4th grade that I experienced the first insult regarding me being gay. I remember I was standing outside class, and this guy, classmate of mine, comes up to me and tells me, "Hey, you're a f-." That was the first time I had ever heard that word. I didn't know what it meant. I knew he was trying to cause harm. And then came middle school. And I feel like up to this point, up to middle school, although that guy had insulted me in 4th grade, I still didn't care what people thought. I was like, I'm gonna do me. I have interests and I'm very curious about things and I wanna try things out. And those curiosities came in theater. At that point, I was like, oh, I really want to act. I got into Destination Imagination, and when I got to middle school, I joined theater. Because I was in Destination Imagination and elementary, my theater teacher then put me in the advanced theater class. Little did I know that my teacher would turn this theater class into a dance class. So I became a dancer. Not really, it was more so, we weren't good. But it was fun and it was exciting. I remember just really enjoying that part of my life, up until the point that because of theater and because of dance and, there were guys in my class that found that to be very gay. I started to get bullied. I would get called names, they would throw things at me, and it became this ongoing fear of going to school, of going to class. I felt trapped because I couldn't go tell my teachers, hey, I'm getting bullied because I'm gay. I couldn't tell my parents, hey, I'm getting bullied at school because I'm gay. It was something I endured by myself. It was something just honestly really scary. It was really scary. I was so scared of what I had endured in middle school, of all the bullying that had happened, that in my head, high school was going to be 10 times worse if people were to find out that I'm gay. And because of the fear of me getting bullied, when I went to this new high school, I saw it as an opportunity to completely rebrand who I am as a person, because at this point, no one there knew who I was. I was the new kid at school, and I took advantage of that. I came up with this story of my life and who I was and what my interests were to really, really cover up anything that would signal people to think that I'm gay. I saw it as a way to survive. My junior year of high school, I ended up joining cheerleading. And it's like, Edgar, you're trying to not let people know you're gay. Why did you join one of the gayest sports that exists? And for me, I think I reached a point where I was just genuinely excited and like curious about doing cheer because it was something that I had wanted to do for a very, very long time. Continued to cheer. After cheering for 2 years, I then transitioned into a coach. And it was so interesting because I was living a Hannah Montana life. And I would leave that bubble of cheer and go back to my real life, which was no one at home knew I was gay. At least I hadn't come out. Some of my friends did, but a lot of them didn't. So this went on again from the moment, the point I graduated high school, which was 2016, up until 2019. It was in 2019 that my biggest fear came to life. And I remember this day as if it was yesterday when I received a text message from my mom. And I have a screenshot of that message, and I haven't read that message since 2019 because it was just something, again, I wanted to avoid and wanted to not accept. But here is a message that I received from my mom back in January of 2019. Edgar, me acabo de encontrar unas fotos muy comprometedoras con ¿Qué está pasando? So to give you some context, the picture was a Polaroid picture of me kissing my then boyfriend. That day she was cleaning my room and she was cleaning my closet and came across the picture. I was coaching, I was at the gym, and remember receiving that text message, looking down, my stomach just dropping, and to me feeling like my life was over. I felt so alone. The workday ends, and I of course don't want to go home. I don't want to drive home because I don't want to face the reality of her knowing and face the reality of her having a conversation with me. Because if that's the way she reacted, I don't want to know what it's going to be like in person. So I ended up driving home, parked on the driveway, and I stayed outside in my car until around midnight to assure myself that everyone inside was already asleep. I go in, go to my room, fall asleep, and the next morning I can hear my brother and sister getting ready for school. I then hear her. They leave. She goes and drops them off at school, and then she comes back home. She knocks on my bedroom door and tells me that we need to talk. So we go to the dining table. She sits down. I sit down, and it was honestly one of the most heartbreaking conversations I've ever had because I had mentally prepared myself to worst. And I had mentally prepared myself for the worst reaction out of my parents, again, because I come from such traditional background. But I think there was a sense of hope in me out of my mom's reaction because she always supported me with all the non-traditional things I did. She supported me with theater and dance, and when I decided I wanted to go model, she's sitting in front of me on the dining table and she's hysterically crying and she's sobbing and she's telling me all the things a child wouldn't want to hear from their parent. And I'm crying and I'm sobbing, trying to process the fact that she now knows, but she isn't being supportive about the fact that she now knows. It was scary. And then the conversation ended because she got a phone call. And it was just like this weird transition of, like, do I get up now? What happens next? I ended up getting up, and that was it. And that was that conversation. And I didn't feel the sense of relief because everything she told me during that conversation was everything I didn't want to hear. I felt like now she knew and she was ashamed of that fact that I was gay. So then, from there on, I continued living my life as if I was Hannah Montana because I just felt like I couldn't talk to her about it. I couldn't talk to her about what was going on in my life. I couldn't talk to her about all the problems that I was facing. I couldn't tell her anything because, again, she didn't support me. So at the end of my undergrad, once I was done with undergrad, I moved to DC, and I am so grateful that I did. I met incredible people. I lived such happy moments. I also lived very depressing moments. Some of the hardest times of my life were spent in DC. But the one thing I have to give DC credit for is the exposure that it brought to my life of being gay. It was in 2021 in DC that I learned that I came to find out that gay dentists existed, that gay lawyers existed, that you could be successful and marry your partner and be married for a very long time, that you can have a healthy relationship with your partner and your boyfriend, and you can live a very happy, fulfilling life while being gay. That was something I just never experienced in El Paso, and I was living in DC, and then I would call home, and I would call with my mom, and I would talk to my mom, and everything I was experiencing, I wasn't telling her. Because up to that point, we still didn't talk about me being gay. We didn't acknowledge me being gay. We had that conversation back in January 2019, but nothing came out of it. So I was living in DC, and I was dating this guy, and we were going out and having fun and just seeing the city. And I'd call my mom and be like, oh, just didn't do anything. I just stayed at my apartment, or I went for a walk. There was a point, November of 2021, where for some reason everything just bottled up. And something triggered it. I don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember what triggered it, but something triggered it, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep hiding who I am. So I called my mom and I was crying. I was sobbing and crying. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is who I am. And I need to know if you're going to accept me this way. Because I cannot keep hiding. And before making that call, I had mentally prepared myself for however or whichever way that answer could have gone. And I think I'm honestly mentally prepared myself for her to not be supportive. But to my surprise, everything she told me in that phone call is everything I wish I would have heard when she first found out. And fast forward to a couple of months, my then boyfriend and I break up. And I was down bad. I was in the trenches, and I was not expecting my mom to be the one to help me navigate the breakup. She would call me and she would check in on me and she would send me texts. I was in disbelief because I couldn't, it didn't seem real that my mom, who 3 years ago was totally things I shouldn't have heard. 3 years later, she was helping me through a breakup with a guy. That was a pivotal point in my life. That grouped with, again, living in DC, learning more about myself and fully embracing who I was, then led to me starting to come out to more people in my life. Besides my mom, no one else in my family knew. I started reaching out to my close cousins, and I told my brother. I would either call him or I would text him. I could never get myself to say, I'm gay. Somewhere in 2023, I made an Instagram post, and that's how I came out to the world, I guess. Which is just such a liberating and beautiful feeling. But even after posting that, I was like, I still feel like there's a part of me that is hiding who I am, because I hadn't had a conversation with my dad. So that August of 2023, I was in El Paso. The first 5 days that I was in El Paso, he wasn't in El Paso. He was down in Mexico. As the trip started nearing the end, in my head I'm like, I'm not gonna tell him. He's not here. So, this isn't gonna happen. He ended up coming back to El Paso. But on my last day, literally on my way to the airport, and every time my family would drop me off at the airport, it would always be both my parents and either my brother and my sister. They would take me to the airport. This time around, when I asked who was taking me to the airport, it was just my dad. And the moment I realized that, I was like, I know exactly what's about to happen. So we're driving, and we're just having a conversation about a lot of different things that I was upset about that, he had done and was doing, and, he was sharing his thoughts. And literally as we get to the airport, he makes the comment of, I just feel like I don't know who you are. To which I replied, to help you get a better idea of who I am, I'm gay. For the first time ever in my life, I said I'm gay. And it was when I came out to my dad. And I felt so secure in myself, and I felt so certain, and I felt so at peace with what I was saying that it didn't matter how he was going to react. I said, I'm gay, and he said, I know, you're my son, and I'm gonna love you forever. I just lost it. One, because that was not the reaction I was expecting from him, and two, because I had finally reached a point in my life where I didn't care. I didn't care what people thought of me being gay. It gets better. It really, really does. If you're still watching and you happen to be in a very different phase of your coming out journey than I am, I want you to know that you are so loved. So whenever that date comes for you, just know it's going to be filled with so much love. But until then, always remember that you're perfect just the way you are.